The air in the conservatory hung thick and sweet, cloying with the scent of lilies and expensive perfume. It felt less like a celebration and more like a cage wrapped in silk ribbons. I sat at a round table, a forced smile aching on my face, watching my sister, the bride-to-be, glide through her bridal shower like a queen surveying her court. Her laughter, bright and sharp, cut through the polite chatter. Every eye was on her as always. Every compliment, every gift, every loving gaze was directed her way. And every time she looked at me, even from across the room, there was a flicker in her eyes, a cold, knowing glint that promised pain. I gripped the delicate teacup in my hands, the porcelain cool against my skin, grounding me in a room that felt like it was spinning slightly off its axis. The ice in the punch bowl tinkled, a tiny, fragile sound in the opulent space. It was a sound that felt like my own hope slowly melting away. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. It helps me more than you know. Life, before that day, felt like a slow, steady climb up a gentle slope. Nothing dramatic, nothing spectacular. Just normal. A quiet apartment, a job I didn't hate, a routine of coffee in the morning and books at night. For years, that had been enough. More than enough some days. I was the quiet sister, the sensible one, the one who didn't demand attention. My sister, Clara, was the firework. Loud, dazzling, leaving a trail of smoke and awe wherever she went. Growing up, everything revolved around Clara. Her achievements, her dramas, her desires. I learned early on that the easiest way to exist was in her shadow. It was safer there. Less scrutiny, fewer expectations. I built a life that was small and manageable, a life where I was in control of the variables.
It chose stability over spontaneity, quiet nights over crowded rooms.
I told myself I preferred it that way. And mostly I did. There was a desire, though. A quiet, persistent hum beneath the surface. A longing for connection, for a shared future, for someone who saw me. Not just the sister of the firework. But relationships were hard. They were messy. And Clara had a knack for inserting herself, for casting a shadow over any potential brightness. A well-meaning question about my dating life that felt like an interrogation, a subtly critical comment about a potential partner, a dramatic crisis that conveniently derailed my plans. I'd tried a few times. Little sparks of hope that were quickly, efficiently extinguished. After a while, I stopped trying. I retreated further into my quiet life, convincing myself that solitude was independence, that being alone was the same as being self-sufficient. Then came David. He wasn't a firework. He was the steady warmth of a hearth. We met through work, a quiet connection that grew slowly, organically. Late-night emails turned into coffee breaks into dinners, dinners into hushed conversations about everything and nothing. He saw the quiet in me, and he didn't try to fill it with noise. He simply sat beside me, sharing the silence, sharing the moments. Our relationship blossomed away from the glare of my family. It felt sacred, private. A hidden garden I tended with care. We talked about the future, not in grand, sweeping gestures, but in small, shared dreams, a tiny house, a dog, quiet evenings together. It was everything I hadn't realized I was starving for. We kept it a secret, partly because it felt precious, too fragile to expose to the harsh light of scrutiny, and partly because I knew, with a bone-deep certainty, that Clara would find a way to twist it, to dim it, to make it about her. I wasn't ready to share David with the chaos of my family. Not yet. We talked about when and how to tell them. A quiet dinner, perhaps. A casual mention. We wanted it to be on our terms. David understood. He was patient, kind. He knew the landscape of my life, the careful steps I had to take. And then came the bridal shower. The invitation arrived like a royal summons. Clara was getting married. Of course, she was. To a perfectly respectable man from a good family. Their wedding was set to be an event, the kind that would be featured in magazines. And the bridal shower was the opening act. My mother, ever the orchestrator of family occasions, had pulled out all the stops. The conservatory was breathtaking, glass walls letting in the hazy afternoon light, filled with flowers that cost more than my monthly rent. A string quartet played soft melodies in the corner. Waitstaff in crisp uniforms circulated with trays of champagne and tiny, perfect appetizers. It was a scene lifted from a movie. And I was an extra, standing awkwardly on the periphery. Clara insisted I sit at the main table, near her. A gesture of sisterly affection, perhaps? Or perhaps a strategic move to keep me close, within striking distance. As the shower progressed, the gifts piled high, the oohs and ahs growing louder with each satin ribbon untied. Clara glowed, accepting the adoration like it was her birthright. I smiled, I complimented, I played the part of the supportive sister. My stomach, however, was a knot of tension. Being in this environment, surrounded by women who measured success in husbands and diamond rings, felt like stepping back in time, to all the moments Clara had made me feel less than. The toasts began after the gifts were opened. Friends, aunts, cousins stood up, sharing anecdotes about Clara's charm, her beauty, her inevitable path to happiness. Each toast was a polished gem, reflecting the radiant bride. My mother went first, her voice thick with emotion as she spoke of her beautiful daughter's journey. Then a few bridesmaids, giggling over shared memories. The microphone was passed around the table. My turn was coming. What would I say? Something generic, something safe. Congratulations, best wishes. Don't make it about me. Don't say anything that could be twisted. Then it was Clara's turn. She stood, raising a glass of champagne, her eyes sparkling. A hush fell over the room. I want to thank everyone, she began, her voice clear and strong, for being here to celebrate with me. This is the happiest time of my life, she paused, scanning the faces in the room, a beat of dramatic silence. Her gaze landed on me. A smile played on her lips, but it didn't reach her eyes. It was a smile I knew well, the precursor to a barb, wrapped in sweetness. And I especially want to thank my sister, she continued, her voice softening slightly, but with an edge that only I could hear. For always being there. She took a sip of champagne. The smile widened, becoming openly condescending. It's wonderful to have a sister by your side on a day like this. Someone to share the joy with. Another pause, the silence stretching, pulling taut. My smile felt brittle, like it might shatter. Though, I suppose, she added, her voice dropping just low enough to force everyone to lean in, but loud enough to carry clearly, some of us are just destined for different paths, aren't we? She paused again, letting the implication hang in the air. Different paths. Her path, paved with love and marriage and future children, and my path. My path. Then she delivered the line. Not a shout, not a whisper, but a carefully calibrated statement, delivered with a practiced sigh of mock pity. Bless her heart, she said, shaking her head slightly. I just worry about her, you know? Always so independent.
So
Self-contained, her eyes locked onto mine, and the cold glint was undeniable now. It was a challenge, a declaration, a public humiliation. I just hope, she finished, her voice dripping with faux concern, loud enough for everyone to hear the punchline, that she doesn't end up completely alone. It would be such a tragedy. The words landed like stones. You'll die alone. She didn't say those exact words, but the meaning was unmistakable, brutal, and designed to inflict maximum pain in front of an audience. A ripple went through the room. Some people shifted uncomfortably. Others looked at me with pity. A few looked away, pretending not to have heard. My mother made a small, distressed sound. But most eyes remained on Clara, waiting for her to move on, to smooth it over, to return to being the radiant bride. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in my chest. The air felt thin, impossible to breathe. My face burned, a fire spreading from my neck upwards. Humiliation, sharp and sudden, flooded me. It was the same feeling I'd had as a child, when she'd point out my awkwardness, my shyness, my lack of sparkle. But this was worse. This was public. This was aimed at the deepest, most vulnerable part of me, the fear that maybe she was right, the quiet ache for connection that she always seemed to sense and exploit. The polite applause for her toast was a distant roar. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. All I could do was sit there, feel the heat on my cheeks, and hear those words echoing in the sudden, ringing silence inside my head. Die alone. Die alone. She sat down, looking perfectly serene, a smug little smile playing on her lips. She didn't look at me again immediately. She knew she'd landed the blow. She could afford to be gracious now. The conversation around the table resumed, but it felt different.
Strained.
People avoided my gaze. I wanted to disappear, to shrink until I was invisible, to run out of the conservatory and never look back. The carefully constructed facade of normalcy I wore felt like it was cracking, revealing the raw, bleeding wound beneath. The rest of the shower after that moment was a blur of forced smiles and polite conversation. I went through the motions, my body on autopilot, while my mind reeled. Those words, "You'll die alone." They weren't just mean, they were a declaration of her perceived victory. She saw my quiet life, my lack of a public partner, as proof that I was failing, that I was less than her. And she wasn't content with just thinking it. She had to announce it, to brand me with it in front of everyone we knew. Every compliment directed at Clara felt like a nail in my coffin of singledom. Every discussion of wedding plans, of honeymoons, of future families felt like a painful reminder of the life I supposedly wouldn't have. I smiled and nodded, but inside, I was screaming. How could she be so cruel? How could my own sister deliberately inflict such pain? The sweetness of the flowers, the elegance of the room, it all felt like a sick joke. This wasn't a celebration of love. It was a coronation of Clara's superiority, and I was cast as the cautionary tale, the lonely spinster she pitied. I excused myself eventually, needing air, needing a moment away from the suffocating weight of the room. I walked aimlessly through the adjacent botanical gardens, the humid air thick with the scent of tropical plants. I needed to breathe. I needed to think. I found a quiet bench nestled among giant ferns, hidden from view. I finally let the tears come, hot and angry, stinging my eyes. It wasn't just the pain of her words. It was the culmination of years of feeling diminished by her, of living in her shadow, of having my own quiet joys overlooked or dismissed. And then, beneath the hurt and the anger, something shifted. A cold clarity washed over me. This wasn't just about me feeling bad for a few hours. This was about her needing to tear me down to feel taller. This was about her insecurity manifesting as cruelty. And she had chosen this moment, my sister's bridal shower, surrounded by friends and family, to deliver the deepest cut she could find. It wasn't just a mean comment. It was a strategic attack. Sitting there, surrounded by the indifferent greenery, the image of her smug face, the pity in her eyes, solidified something within me. I wouldn't just sit back and take it anymore. I wouldn't let her define me. I wasn't alone. I had David. My secret, wonderful David. And in that moment, the secret stopped feeling like something to protect and started feeling like something powerful. Something she didn't know about. Something she couldn't touch.
Yet.
A new feeling emerged, cold and hard, replacing the pain. Determination. And something else, sharper, less pleasant. A desire for balance. For the scales to tip back. For her to feel blindsided, just as I had been. The idea began to form, tentative at first, then bolder, fueled by the lingering sting of her words and the surge of cold anger. David and I had talked about telling the family soon. But telling them quietly over dinner felt insufficient now. Not after her performance. I pulled out my phone, my fingers trembling slightly. I found David's number. He was supposed to be home, working. I hesitated. Was this fair to him? To drag him into this family drama? But then I thought of his kindness, his steady presence, the way he looked at me like I was the most precious thing in the world. He was my partner. He deserved to know the depth of the cruelty I faced. And he deserved to be part of whatever came next. I typed out a message, deleting and retyping it several times.
Can you call me? Urgent.
My phone rang almost immediately. Hey. David's voice was warm, slightly concerned. Everything okay? You sound a little off. I'm at the shower, I said, my voice shaking slightly. Clara just. She said something. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. In her toast. In front of everyone. She basically said I was going to die alone. Pitted me. Silence on the other end. I could almost hear him processing it, his initial confusion turning to understanding, then to something else, something protective and fierce I rarely heard in his voice. She what? He finally said, his voice low. In front of everyone? Yes, I whispered, the tears starting again, but these felt different. Less sad, more angry. It was calculated. She looked right at me. Okay, he said, his voice firming up. Okay. I'm so sorry, love. That's awful. Are you all right? Do you want me to come get you? No, I said, surprising myself with the strength in my voice. No, I don't want to leave. Not like this. A cold, strategic part of my mind was working now, clicking into place. David, I said, my voice dropping. Remember how we talked about when to tell everyone? About us. Yeah, he sounded cautious now. She thinks I'm alone, I said, the words tasting like ice on my tongue. She thinks I'm destined for it. She used it to hurt me. Publicly? I paused, letting the weight of it sink in. What if? What if we told them now? What if you came here? To the shower? More silence. I held my breath. Was this too much? Too soon? Too dramatic? To the bridal shower? He asked slowly. Yes, I confirmed.
Now.
Everyone's here. She put me on display as the sad, lonely sister. What if you came and changed that narrative? Publicly? I waited, my heart pounding. This was it. The thought had sprung fully formed from my anger and hurt. It was risky.
It was dramatic.
It was potentially messy. But the image of Clara's face when she realized just how wrong she was, when she saw the life she insisted I didn't have standing right there, next to me, it was a powerful motivator. David was quiet for a long moment. I heard him sigh, a long, slow sound. I braced myself for him to say no, to tell me it was a bad idea, to suggest we handle this another way. But then he spoke. She said you'd die alone, he repeated, his voice flat, dangerous. Yes, I confirmed. Then let's show her exactly how wrong she is, he said, his voice steel. Tell me where you are. Give me an hour. Maybe less, depending on traffic. A wave of relief, mixed with nervous energy, washed over me.
He was in.
He understood. He was willing to step into the lion's den for me. The conservatory, I said, giving him the address again. Well, it's a bridal shower. People are dressed up. I'll put on a suit, he said, his tone dry. Just hang in there. Don't let her see you're hurting. Put on your armor. Armor.
Yes.
I needed armor. I ended the call, feeling a surge of adrenaline. The tears were gone, replaced by a cold, clear focus. I wasn't going to run. I was going to stay. I was going to sit there, smile, and wait. Wait for David. Wait for the moment the narrative would flip. The rest of the shower stretched ahead, feeling both agonizingly long and suddenly full of anticipation. I walked back towards the main area, rejoining the festivities. My smile felt more genuine this time, or perhaps it was just a better constructed facade. I nodded at people, accepted a glass of champagne, made small talk. But beneath the surface, a storm was brewing. The pressure built with every passing minute. The shower continued, oblivious to the silent war being waged. Clara was back in full form, laughing, chatting, basking in the glow of her impending marriage. She caught my eye once, and her smile was back, the one that didn't reach her eyes. It held a question, a silent taunt. Did I get you? Did it sting? I met her gaze this time, not with pain, but with a cool, neutral expression. I gave nothing away. Her smile wavered slightly. Good. Let her wonder. The time crawled. An hour felt like a lifetime. I kept glancing at my watch, at the entrance to the conservatory. Every time the door opened, my heart leaped. Was it him? Not yet. It was a server, a late guest, someone from the staff. The tension was a physical weight in my chest. What if something went wrong? What if traffic was terrible? What if he couldn't make it? What if he arrived at the wrong moment? My thoughts churned, a mix of nervous doubt and resolute determination. This had to work. After her cruelty, after years of feeling invisible, this felt necessary. Not just for me, but for us. For David and me. To step out of the shadows, to claim our space, our future. This wasn't just revenge, it was liberation. The shower activities moved on. Bridal bingo, advice cards, more champagne. The volume of the room seemed to rise and fall in waves. I participated just enough to not seem odd, my mind elsewhere. I rehearsed the moment in my head. How would he enter? What would he say? How would people react? How would Clara react? The thought of her reaction sent a thrill through me, a dark, satisfying anticipation. She expected me to be crushed, to retreat, to cry. She did not expect me to stand tall, with someone by my side. Especially not someone like David, who is everything her superficial world overlooked. My mother came over to me at one point, her brow furrowed with concern. "Are you all right, dear?" she whispered, her eyes flicking towards Clara, then back to me. "Don't listen to Clara. You know how she is." I managed a small smile. "I'm fine, Mom," I said, my voice calm. "Really?" She looked unconvinced, but she didn't press. She saw the surface calm, not the turmoil beneath, not the steel that had formed in the last hour, the steel that was waiting. As the shower began to wind down, the energy shifting from peak festivity towards lingering conversations, I felt a new wave of panic. Had David missed his window? Had he been delayed? The light outside the glass walls was starting to soften, the golden hour approaching. Soon, the shower would be over, and the moment would pass. Then I saw him. The large glass doors to the conservatory opened again. A figure stood silhouetted against the light outside. Tall, broad-shouldered. David. He was wearing a suit, just as he'd said, and he looked out of place, in the best possible way, like a rock among floating silk scarves. A ripple went through the room. Heads turned towards the entrance. Who was this? He wasn't one of the planned guests. Clara, who was laughing with a group of friends near the gift table, paused, her laughter dying on her lips. She turned her head, following the gaze of her guests. Her eyes landed on David. Confusion flickered across her face. She didn't recognize him. Why would she? He was from my hidden life. David scanned the room, his eyes finding mine instantly. He offered a small, reassuring smile. My heart leaped, not with panic this time, but with a surge of warmth and certainty. He was here. He was real. He started walking towards me. Slowly, deliberately. Every step felt weighted with significance. The polite chatter in the room began to fade, replaced by a growing hush. All eyes were on him now. And then, as he approached my table, people started to look at me, then back at him, their expressions shifting from curiosity to dawning realization. Who was this man walking towards me? Clara was watching, her confusion deepening. She took a few steps away from her friends, her gaze fixed on David. Her smile was gone, replaced by a frown of annoyance and perhaps a hint of suspicion. What was happening? Who was this intruder? David reached my table. He didn't sit down. He stood beside me, his presence solid, grounding. He looked at me, and in his eyes I saw all our shared moments, all our quiet love, all the future we had planned. He reached out and took my hand, his touch warm and firm. I stood up beside him, my legs feeling a little shaky. The room was completely silent now. Every single person was watching. Clara was frozen, about 10 feet away, her eyes wide, darting between David and me. Her face was pale. She seemed to sense, on some primal level, that the script had gone off the rails. David turned to face the room, still holding my hand. He didn't address Clara directly. He addressed everyone. His voice was calm, clear, carrying effortlessly through the hushed space. "I'm sorry to interrupt," he said, his gaze sweeping across the astonished faces. "But I had to come. There was something important I needed to do today. Something I realized couldn't wait another moment." He looked back at me, his eyes filled with so much love that for a second, I almost forgot the audience, forgot Clara, forgot everything but him. He squeezed my hand gently. Then he did it.
He knelt down.
Right there, in the middle of my sister's opulent bridal shower, surrounded by lilies and stunned silence, David knelt on one knee. A collective gasp swept through the room. It was louder than the string quartet, louder than Clara's laughter, louder than the tinkle of ice. It was the sound of dozens of people realizing, simultaneously, that they were witnessing something completely unexpected. Something dramatic. Something beautiful. David reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small box. My breath hitched. I knew, intellectually, what was happening, but seeing the box, seeing him there, kneeling in front of everyone, it was overwhelming. He opened the box. Inside, nestled on velvet, a ring sparkled. Not huge or flashy, but elegant, perfect. He looked up at me, his eyes shining. "You once told me," he said, his voice low and steady, for my ears alone, though the silent room meant everyone heard, "that you were afraid of being alone. That you sometimes worried that was your destiny." He paused, his smile widening, erasing any trace of the serious tone. "I'm here to tell you that your destiny is with me. It's with us." He held up the ring. "Will you marry me?" The question hung in the air, suspended in the shocked silence. My throat was tight with emotion. Tears blurred my vision again, but these were tears of joy, of disbelief, of overwhelming gratitude. I looked at David, at the ring, at the sea of astonished faces around us. And then my eyes landed on Clara. She wasn't just surprised.
She was
collapsing. Her hand flew to her chest. Her eyes were wide, her mouth slightly open. Her face had gone from pale to ashen. She swayed on her feet, looking utterly blindsided, as if she'd been physically struck. The smugness, the condescension, the carefully constructed facade of the radiant bride, it all crumbled away in an instant, replaced by pure, unadulterated shock and disbelief. This wasn't happening. Not here.
not now.
Not to me. The public proposal, the ultimate act of anti-loneliness, delivered precisely when she had declared my solitary fate, was the most exquisite, unexpected counterpunch. She had aimed to wound me, to expose my perceived lack. Instead, she had inadvertently created the perfect stage for my hidden happiness to burst into the light, eclipsing her moment, flipping the script entirely. As I looked at David, at his hopeful face, I knew my answer. "Yes," I whispered, the word thick with tears and emotion. "Yes, I will." He grinned, a broad, joyful grin, and stood up, sliding the ring onto my finger. It fit perfectly. He pulled me into a hug, holding me tight. I buried my face in his shoulder, breathing him in, feeling his strength, his love. The silence in the room broke. Not with applause immediately, but with gasps, whispers, murmurs of astonishment. People were looking at us, yes, but their eyes kept flicking towards Clara. She hadn't fully collapsed, but she was being held up by one of her bridesmaids, her face a mask of shock and something else. Rage? Humiliation? All of it. She looked like someone had just pulled the rug out from under her entire world. Her bridal shower, her carefully curated moment in the spotlight, had just been irrevocably altered by the very person she had publicly mocked. The plot twist wasn't just the proposal, it was Clara's reaction. Her complete, visible, undeniable breakdown in the face of my unexpected happiness. She hadn't just been surprised, she had been utterly defeated by the sudden, irrefutable proof that her cruel words were not just false, but spectacularly, publicly wrong. She had aimed her poisoned arrow, only for it to rebound and strike her square in the chest. The aftermath was a strange, chaotic blend of emotions. Some guests, recovering from their shock, began to tentatively applaud, then more enthusiastically. People started coming towards us, offering congratulations, looking excited, thrilled by the unexpected drama. My mother rushed forward, tears in her eyes, hugging me fiercely, then David. She was clearly bewildered, but happy. But the center of the room remained fixed on Clara. She had recovered enough to stand on her own, but she was trembling, her face contorted with fury and disbelief. She pointed a shaky finger at me, then at David. "You," she choked out, her voice raw. "How dare you? How could you? At my shower." Her fiancé, a kind but somewhat oblivious man, came over, trying to understand what was happening. "Clara? Are you okay? What's wrong?" "What's wrong?" she shrieked, turning her fury on him for a moment. "She's engaged. She got engaged. Here. Now." He looked at me, then at David, a slow smile spreading across his face.
"Oh.
"Congratulations," he said warmly, reaching out to shake David's hand. "That's wonderful news." Clara looked at him like he had lost his mind. "Wonderful," she spat, turning back to me, her eyes blazing. "You did this deliberately. To ruin my day. To take the attention away from me. You were worried I'd die alone, Clara," I said, my voice quiet but clear, the steel still there. I held up my left hand, the ring sparkling. "Just wanted to reassure you that won't be happening." Her face crumpled further. She looked around at the guests, who were now awkwardly trying to navigate the scene, torn between congratulating us and comforting the visibly distraught bride. The atmosphere had completely fractured. It was no longer a serene bridal shower. It was a family drama unfolding in real time, set against a backdrop of expensive flowers and tiny sandwiches. Clara couldn't handle it. She let out a choked sob that sounded more like frustrated rage, and pushed past her fiancé and bridesmaid, storming out of the conservatory. The door swung shut behind her, leaving a stunned silence in her wake. The energy shifted again. A few people went after her, concern etched on their faces. Others remained, milling around, whispering. And some, the ones who had perhaps seen Clara's cruelty over the years, came over and quietly, genuinely, congratulated us. They saw the moment for what it was, not just a proposal, but a reclaiming. David held my hand, his presence a constant comfort. We accepted the congratulations, answered questions about how we met, carefully edited for the audience, and showed off the ring. The initial chaos subsided into a weird kind of dual celebration. The shower was technically still happening, but now it had this entirely unplanned, deeply dramatic subplot. Leaving the shower felt surreal. We didn't stay much longer after Clara left. The air was thick with unresolved tension. My mother was flustered, torn. My father, who arrived late, was baffled. Clara refused to speak to anyone. Walking out of the conservatory, out of that perfumed, tense air into the late afternoon light, felt like stepping out of a storm. I was still shaky, emotionally drained, but also exhilarated. We drove home in comfortable silence, the ring on my finger feeling wonderfully heavy and real. David interlaced his fingers with mine. "Are you okay?" he asked softly. "Yeah," I said, a long sigh escaping me. "Yeah, I think so."
It was
intense. That's one word for it. He chuckled, a low, warm sound. "I'm sorry it had to happen like that. So publicly.
so
Dramatically." "Don't be," I said, turning his hand over and pressing a kiss to his palm. "It was perfect. You were perfect." I thought of Clara's face, the shock, the raw humiliation.
She needed to see it.
Everyone needed to see it. We talked late into the night, processing the events of the day. The backlash from Clara would come. We knew. But for the first time, I wasn't afraid. I had David. I had the ring. I had the truth of our love, finally out in the open. Her cruelty, her attempt to mark me with loneliness, had backfired spectacularly. She had intended to diminish me, but instead, she had inadvertently provided the perfect, unforgettable platform for my greatest happiness. The sting of her words still lingered, a faint echo, but they were hollow now. They held no power. She had tried to define me by what I lacked in her eyes, but she hadn't seen the richness, the love, the future I had been building in secret. That day, I didn't just get engaged. I reclaimed my narrative. I stepped out of the shadow she had cast for so long, not with a whimper, but with a moment that would be talked about for years. It wasn't the quiet announcement I had imagined, but it was undeniably powerful. And as I lay in bed that night, David's arm around me, the ring sparkling faintly in the moonlight, I knew that I was not, and would never be, alone. The future stretched ahead, bright and clear, no longer overshadowed by the fear she had tried to instill. If this story hit close to home, I'd love to hear your version in the comments below. And if you haven't already, subscribing truly helps bring more of these stories to life.